Well, howdy folks. Charlie with Typewriter Justice here, and earlier I shot a little bitty video on how to remount one of these spring drums. This is for an Erika M. M is for Meisterclass. M is for major pain in the butt if you're working on them, because man, these things are just absolute beasts. They get kind of complicated in there, but incredibly well-designed machines. This one had popped its drawstring, and when the spring drum retracted, it went pew and shot off the center post. And that can be sometimes reattached if you wind it the correct way, but very often not. And what I had to do on this one was drop that center post out, wedge the little tab that the actual clock spring engages with, and to where it could grab on there a little better. And now I've got it reinstalled. I have a fresh drawband on there, and ready to add tension to it. And this is one of the trickiest parts for this whole process on any machine. And with most machines, I use a variation of this exact method. And this is a really good one to demonstrate it with. So I figured, what the hell, might as well make a video. So it's kind of a multi-step process. First off, you got the drawband actually attached inside the spring drum. A lot of typewriters have a spring drum that'll allow you to make a knot on your drawstring and then poke it in there once tension has been added. With the Erika, it's kind of that way, but not really. So I like to add it before I add tension while the thing is apart. And most machines where you can take the spring drum apart, that's going to be the best way to do it, because nobody ever really cleans the actual leaf spring that's inside there, the clock spring, but you should, because they grease it, and over time that grease binds up and kind of transfers the majority of the working load for that spring onto a small portion of that spring, and that's how you wind up with a broken one. Now, assuming that you've already gotten all that done and repacked and the whole thing's mounted and you got your drawstring in there, and then you got to feed your drawstring through. And I do that with a little piece of piano wire, music wire, that has just a tiny little hook on the end of it, and that hook has a space just big enough to be able to fit around the edge of my string, right? Because sometimes you need to grab it. But you take this and you feed it through up underneath the carriage and then attach it to your string, and then you can pull it back out without having to lose your mind on that whole process. And just make you one of these and stick it aside, because if you're like me, you're going to use it more than once. So then you got a string that is trying to stay loose inside there, and as soon as you let go of it, it's going to go pew, and then you're going to have to redo it. So what you do is you find a pivot point, and on the Erika, it's got a nice little slotted piece which works perfectly for this. Find a place to pivot the thing, wrap it around something, and attach something to it to give it a little bit of weight. So you're holding just mild tension on that drawstring as you're working and as you're going to be adding tension to the spring drum. Because unlike spring drums where you actually have a step arrangement, some of the Smith Coronas and Royals, those all have it. You can incrementally decrease tension or put a screwdriver onto one side of the center post for the spring drum and add tension, and then with the step arrangement lock it in place. The Erika doesn't have one of those. Most portables don't, actually. So we're going to do it the hard way. And, well, not the hard way, we're just doing it by hand. And what I mean by that is literally by hand. So while I'm doing that, I'm just going to add a little bit of tension to keep my string down in the right spot. But actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here because I want to explain this a little better. Because it can be counterintuitive to how to actually wind it. So from this position, we need that spring drum to generate force counterclockwise, because it needs to pull this carriage that way. So that string needs to wind up counterclockwise, which means that we need to spin this clockwise. And as we do that, this string is going to try to loop itself around that spring drum. And so instead of doing that, instead of allowing that string to loop itself around there, we're going to push it down, and it's going to pop around that open side, because see, this side is open. You can actually see behind it. And that's the space right through here where that string is going to pass. All right. And that's where this is going to come into play. So I'm going to put that on there. That's going to allow me to spin this. So there's one full revolution. And my little system over here is holding that string taut instead of having a bunch of slack over here as I'm working. So I've got one full revolution. Holding tension, I'm going to go for a second full revolution. So there's 2 full revolutions. And I really only want about 3 to 5 on any machine. If you're having to put more than 5 revolutions in there, then you're probably going to break your spring drum, and you're just or not break your spring drum, but your mainspring. You're just kind of asking for trouble. So now, pulled this loose. That right there should be about where I want my knot in this. All right, and that feels like a good amount of tension. And that's at 3 full revolutions. So with 3 full revolutions, I'm going to hold that right where I want it. Grab my other handy dandy forceps here. Whoa, if I can do them one-handed. Those things are not designed to be left-handed. Pull that little keeper out. All right, so that's in place. I'm going to run a little knot in here. And again, this part of this process will change for whatever machine you're dealing with. Sometimes you'll just tie a loop in the end of it, and sometimes you'll have a little keeper the way they do on the Erika here. I'm just going to move that little knot down. And there we go. And I may need to add more tension on that. I might not. And if I do, then you can just do a variation of the same process we just went through. Yeah, that'll work. Anyway, if you find yourself working on an Erika and it starts hollering at you, well, holler at me. I love these things. Anyway, hope that helps somebody out there. Later.